G'day everyone. Welcome to the Outback Packers podcast, the podcast where two mates from all the way across the world have a yarn talking Packers football and the green and gold. I'm Nick Gregory with my co-host Iowa Joe. As always, Joe is in the promised land. He's just arrived in Green Bay a couple hours ago. We're going to be taking a look back over the past decade of Packers football. But first, Joe, what's it like? I've never been, obviously.
Well, it's kind of crazy, and not to offend people, but these Wisconsin drivers really need to learn, go back to driving school, because just after I hit the Wisconsin border, there were 2 or 3 accidents that slowed my time down. So they need to learn or relearn or go back to school or something. But other than that, it's nice up here. I like I said, or like you said, I've only been up here a few hours. It's an 8-hour trip. I got to my Airbnb. I brought my shit in. Then I took like a 5-minute trip over to Lambeau, and that's about all I did so far. Most of it'll go for tomorrow. I'll save most of it for tomorrow. But I guess I did the typical thing when you get here. I went to Quick Trip and got me a pizza, and that was my dinner. So. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, I can get over to Lambeau when they're having some of the practices this coming week. And if you guys are out there, well, unfortunately, I'd say come see me or whatever. But this episode will be like come out the day before I go home. So, but I will tweet out and stuff like that. So hopefully, if you guys did see me, you stopped by and said hello or whatever. Just don't hit me. I don't feel like being hit.
Yeah, no, it's always really interesting to hear about what it's like there, and obviously, like you only just arrived, but it's so far away. We always talk about this with the international guests as well. Like, it's just so far away, but we're all like so obsessed with it. And even for like a lot of guys in America who don't even live, remotely close to that area of the Midwest, it's just like very funny that we're also like in tune with it. And I'll have to make the pilgrimage down one day. But it's like what's the schedule look like for you as far as like when the camps are?
I think they had one practice today, which obviously I missed.
Yeah.
And then the 12th through the 15th or the 13th through the 15th, they have more practices. But I'm going to assume they have meetings and that on the couple days between. So who knows, if I'm hanging around there enough, I might see 1 or 2 players out there or whatever.
Yeah. And like, do you
But
like?
I'm pretty sure that either the 12th through the 15th or the 13th through the 15th they have practices. Now whether they're open or not, I don't know. Maybe I'll have to like punch Matt Schneidman and steal his press credentials, or follow in behind Wes Hod or Demofsky or something, and sneak into practice. But
And so like do you have to pay to get in? Like how does it work? Like once you get to the field.
most of the time, if they're open to practice, no, there's no fee or anything. It's just first come, first serve. You go in, you sit however long you want, and you're done. Now, training camps I know a little bit better because this is my first time coming up to do any kind of the OTAs or the off-season practices. So I don't know that too much. But like at training camp, they had stands. You go into the stands, you can watch, however long you want. And they usually had long lines for people waiting to get in the stands. But no, there's no fees or anything, or you can hang out by the fence and watch. Now, like I said, that's when they're open to practice. When they're closed off to practice, usually they go to the side of the Hudson Center, either inside Hudson Center or on the other opposite side, and they have those fences tarped off so nobody can really see in there.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's really cool. Like what are you most excited to see at minicamp?
The Iowa guys.
Yeah.
No, I'm just excited for it all, really. I want to see, because I haven't been up here since 2019. So this is my first time back up here since 2019. So I've never seen
Yeah.
Jordan Love throw the ball live. So that's going to be an experience. Obviously, the Iowa guys, the new draft picks coming in this year. I hate to say it, but to see what the kicker can do, just to see if he's going to be something or if it's going to be a hair pull all through, pulling out my hair all season. Kind of the punter competition. I know O'Donnell's probably got it, but I really do want to see what this kid that they brought in from, what was it, the XFL or the USFL or one of those at Wheeling.
Yeah, yeah.
I do kind of want to see what he can do, but yeah, it's like I said, I want to see it all, but those are just kind of the pinpoints of maybe the wide receivers, because again, this is my first time up here since 2019, so I've not seen Dobbs, I haven't seen Watson, none of the wide receivers on the or tight ends or anything. I have never seen those in person, so this is like a whole brand new team for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny like seeing like Lucas Van Ness, and I'm like, oh man, he is the same age as me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, shut up, asshole.
Yeah,
Because
like, there you go.
no, I was just going to say the last one that was on or the last two or three that were on the team that I could say that were older than me was Mason, Mercedes, and Rogers, and now they're all gone. I think the only
Oh, go
ones
on.
that are older than me right now are the head coaches.
Yeah, I think it's just very funny, like yeah, just like seeing like the physical difference because obviously these guys are training for a long time. And actually, it was really funny last night, a little bit unrelated, but like when I used to play football, I was like converting to pounds, like almost 30 pounds heavier than I am now, and like when I was playing, like I bought these like pair of shorts, and I couldn't like get them around my legs, so I just like left them in my dresser, and I pulled them out last night to try them on and see if they fit, and I could fit literally like a fist and a half inside the inside where my legs used to not be able to get in, and it was just like, man, if that's like even like. I wasn't even that big then, but it's like imagining how big those guys actually are, like in terms of how much effort they put into their bodies. Just like it's just crazy. Like those guys are like basically aliens.
You were juicing, weren't you? That's what it was. You were juicing. You had
Oh,
the Barry Bonds syndrome going on. You got really big when you were juicing, and then once you got off the juice, you thinned up.
yeah, I was getting too angry, too much roid rage.
But yeah, I mean, it happens. I obviously can't say that, but I'm a little weight wise, I'm bigger, but it's really weird because I actually don't show what I weigh. I mean, I'm a big guy, obviously. If anybody's seen me, I'm a big guy. But if I were to tell somebody how much I actually weigh, they look at me like I'm nuts because I don't show it. So
Sure,
even though I weigh more than what people think, I still am like the same build as I was in high school.
sure.
So yeah, there's a lot of clothes that I have had throughout college and that I can still put on just because I've not, the numbers went up, but nothing else has really changed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I
Cool. Is there
am
anything?
definitely not juiced
Sorry, say again.
up. I said I am definitely not juiced up.
Is there anything else you want to go over before we start getting into the subject for today?
No, like I said, and if I was thinking last week, I would have said something on our on the episode about if anybody saw me around Lambo, stop and say hey or whatever. But unfortunately, I guess I missed my spot on that. So, haha, you guys suck. You don't get to see me.
Yeah, yeah. One day when I'm not totally broke, I'll absolutely make the pilgrimage and catch a game.
Yeah, that's definitely the truth. The prices are nuts.
Yep, yep. All right. So today's episode: what made previous Packers teams great? Now, for reference, being as I am a child in comparison to most people in the Packers Twitter, I'm keeping it to the recent 13 years, 2010 and onwards. But like, I just want to go over like what made these teams so great. You know, they obviously this is like the prime of Aaron Rodgers' career. We have a ring in there and some was it 4 NFC Championship games in there. And I just want to go over, you know, there were so many great players who've come through Lambeau, so many great teams, and obviously on the flip side of that, so many kind of tragic exits. You're thinking of guys like Nick Collins, Jermichael Finley. I just want to kind of go over like, you know, like just a bit of like a retrospective over the past 13 years, and you know how we can kind of capture that going into 2023, and hopefully get the same thing with Jordan Love 10 years from now in another episode going over how good the 2020s were.
Can I say something kind of confidential or not confidential,
Controversial.
controversial? And I know I'm going to get slammed for this, and I'm not saying that they were bad players, but I have a different look on Nick Collins and Jermichael Finley than it seems like everybody else does.
Wow.
They were solid players, but everybody acts like they were like these, once in a lifetime talents, but they fail to remember all the seasons leading up to, their 1 year and then the year that they got injured. I mean, Nick Collins had such an up and down career up until the Super Bowl season, and then even before he got injured, he was, he kind of reverted back, and then he got injured. And now it's kind of like the Sean Jones, not Jones, the one that got murdered from Washington a while back.
Sean Taylor.
Taylor, that's it. Not that they weren't bad players. It just, I
Sure.
think people remember it a little bit different because of what happened. Jermichael Finley, the same way. Yeah, he was an athletic freak, but does everybody seem to forget that he was also a dropper? I mean, he dropped so many friggin' passes that, when so like I said, not that they were bad players or anything like that. And it just, I don't know what it is. People seem to remember it a lot different than I do. I don't know.
Sure. And something I think is very interesting. Obviously, I wasn't around for some of these seasons, like as in the same way I am now. I've seen a lot of cut ups, and obviously, like I've watched the Super Bowl many times and things like that. But I do think, yeah, it's quite an interesting point because I think, especially Nick Collins, if he was drafted, you know, a couple of years ago, I think the fan reception would be incredibly different because he didn't really like you said, he didn't pop off until what, like year 5, because he was drafted in '08, right,
Right.
or maybe a bit earlier. Yeah,
I
like
think it was the same year as Rogers.
sorry, really, 05, 04?
I think. I will look real
Really?
quick.
But I don't know. It definitely was not. It was like at the very tail end of his rookie contract or just after, and like, excuse me, like that. Like obviously he became a good player, and that's okay. But I think the fan reception, if someone wasn't good for that long, could you imagine? I still have a tough time trying to convince people that MVS was a good player. And I just think, you know, if people, you know, even like example, Darnell Savage, if Darnell Savage comes up
Oh
and
five.
he's, yeah, right. No, exactly. But yeah, example, if Darnell Savage, who has had up and downs, if he comes up this year and he's like a Hall of Fame level talent, obviously a bit of a leap, but if he becomes like a top 5, top 10 safety in the league, that's kind of almost like a very similar thing to with Nick Collins. And obviously, I don't have the exact same view as you did being there. But it is just funny how we view player progression so differently now. I mean, like we're so used to players producing within their first and second year that sometimes when it takes, you know, the end of the second year or even the third year, it seems like, oh yeah, I'm not sure if they're going to be good or not. You know,
Well, I mean, just looking at Collins' stats, yeah, he has some stats to him, but it really wasn't until year 4 before he started taking that next step. And even then, I mean, like I said, I'm not saying they were bad players because obviously Nick Collins, we don't know what would have happened had he continued to play. But it just, yeah, I don't know. It's really weird.
no, sure,
And
and I
then
think
with
it's
Jermichael, like I said, Jermichael was a drop. It seemed like I remember him, people yelling about stone hands and everything else for Michael Finley, but he was, he was an athletic freak. So I don't know. It's like I said, people seem to remember things a lot different than I seem to be, I guess.
Sure. Well, so of these teams here, I'm thinking 2010, 2011, 2014, 2020, and 2021 as like the clear
Don't
standout teams.
remember him.
It's a bit painful. Which of these teams do you feel was the best team? Most well rounded, deep, but still has the high end talent. And obviously, 2010 gets a bit of a nod because they actually won. But does that
But they
necessarily
weren't even
mean that they
that
were the.
great of a team. They just got hot at the right time. That's what makes
No,
that
sure.
year so great.
No, sure. Exactly.
2014, 2014, it seemed like they had everything, but it just they whatever happened in the championship game. But 2014, they seemed to have all the talent, they had all the power and everything, but whatever. I mean, you can blame it on whatever. You can blame it on Bostic. You can blame it on, you know, Burnett. You can blame it on whoever you want, but it was a complete team failure. But if I had to say anybody, it would be that team.
Yep. No, very fair. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think 2014 is probably the most like balanced, and obviously they had a better regular season. 2010 is just so interesting to me because I feel like the thing about the 2010 team is that the depth was so fantastic. And like you said, they got hot at the right time. They got really lucky with some of the player acquisitions, like the UDFAs and things like that. But in terms of who they had behind them, I mean, in the Super Bowl, they had Woodson go out and Shields went out as well, right?
Yeah, and Donald Driver.
Yeah, like so they had all those like phenomenal players go out, but the guys they had behind them were like key pieces for those teams in the years following. That's the thing that always blows my mind. And kind of looking back at the teams that we've had in the past 3 or 4 years since LaFleur's come back, they've had really phenomenal high end talent. 2020 especially, like the best player at like a few different positions. But this is the depth, right? Like the once the starter goes out, once Bach went out, there was not really anyone behind him who could get even remotely close.
Well, I don't know. They did have guys, but it seemed like they kept throwing people in weird positions. It not that one, but the next year, 2021, wasn't it? Where Yash had been like the left tackle for
Sure,
however many games, and then we get to the championship game, and all of a sudden he's no longer the left tackle. They decide to throw
Billy
whoever
Turner.
out there. Yeah.
Ugh,
So
don't remind me.
some weird things happen there, but like I said, I'm not going to downplay 2010 for nothing because, like I said, they got hot at the right time and they won the Super Bowl. It just, if you were to look at that team, it wasn't really, if it wouldn't have been for the last bit push and then Deshaun Jackson returning a punt for a touchdown, the Packers wouldn't even have made the playoffs that year.
Sure.
So, and they were the ultimate underdogs, and that's why it made it a good run and made the Super Bowl worth it because they were the underdogs into every game that they played. Yeah, they had a good amount of depth, but even if you looked at some of the starters, they weren't that great. Because they were even dealing with a lot of injuries. That's why everybody uh, kept saying that the next year was going to be this amazing team because the Packers lost so many, players to injured reserve that had they been there, we probably could have, had a season where we went 13 and what was it, a 13-3 at the time and, been the number one seed because they lost both their tackles. They lost running back. They got down to like their second and third string running backs, inside linebackers, outside linebackers. They lost all these guys, and yeah. So I mean, that's why I said it. It was a great Super Bowl win, but it wasn't the greatest team.
Sure, yeah. No, absolutely.
Sorry if I go long. I'm just super tired, so I
Oh
just
no, all good.
ramble.
No, all good, all good. No, yeah, definitely. I think yeah, like, and the fact that yeah, they came in as like you said, there's the last seed, and they went to those other stadiums, and especially like that Atlanta game, the fact that they played so well against such a good team, and just like Rogers finally coming out as this elite quarterback, that's kind of like what made it special, right? There's like the growth in the season, not the fact that they were already good and steamrolling everyone.
Well, what helped is they didn't really lose anything in the wide receiver room, and they didn't really lose anything in certain aspects of the team. They didn't really lose anything in the secondary. They didn't really lose anything in the wide receiver. So they had certain spots that were still elite. So yeah, but yeah, it was a coming out party. I mean, up until then, Rogers was starting to build up to be good, but he still couldn't get over the injury bug thing because he was still getting, he'd already been concussed like twice and broken foot and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Well, okay, so but with these teams, what made them so good? Like, what exactly do you think was the reason why they went so far and why they had such great records, say for 2010?
20, I don't know how you want me to answer this. 2011, they were so good because the offense was the type of offense to go out and score a million points. The defense just couldn't hold anybody. I think that was a year that people had high hopes, but it just because they only lost one game that year.
Yeah,
Well, they lost two, but they only lost one regular season game. They didn't obviously go to the Super Bowl. But 2014, I think it was because they were well rounded. They had the playmakers. They just they had the ability to go as far as you could go. It just stupid mistakes ruined it. Same kind of for 20, I would say 2020 and 2021. Even though they lost Bakhtiari, they still had a chance to make that run. But you had the boneheaded defensive plays, you had the boneheaded decision to, mix up your offensive line from what was already working in the regular season. You had because that was the year that they moved Jenkins out to left tackle, and he was thriving out there because that's what everybody was thinking he was going to be able to make the move to tackle because he was thriving. Then they moved him off a tackle. 2021, 2022, they same thing. Why is Rodgers throwing to triple covered Devontae when he had Lazard and Cobb wide open across the field? And a block punt is the only points that are scored by the 49ers. So,
mhm.
what it just seems like they're always shooting themselves in the foot. Now they have had some down teams, but they've had some bad luck with it, injuries and whatever, but it's been more shooting themselves in the foot than it has been anything else.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, and I think this kind of like self sabotage is kind of a consistent theme in these like failed seasons. Oh, that's harsh words, but the teams that didn't win at all. And I think with the injuries to Nick Collins and Jermichael Finley, like we're just talking about, not necessarily because obviously they were good players, but not necessarily that they were world beating, first team All Pro, legendary Hall of Fame talents. But it's kind of indicative of the front office's inability to replace and like target those positions. Like they were kind of just content. Obviously, I'm sure they tried, but example in 2011, the once Nick Collins was out, it was very difficult to replace him, and they still hadn't really solidified the safety position, you know, for years after that. And again, tight end, they're like I guess they just didn't really value them. I mean, like, what's your take on that?
The Ted Thompson philosophy was once you got into the season, you didn't bother with actual free agents. You would pick up, UDFAs or street guys or whatever, but you really didn't sign big name free agents once you got into the season. So that's one of it. He would never reach into that free agent pool when there was a veteran out there that could possibly fill that spot. Gutekunst has kind of leaned in there a little bit. He's been a little bit more open to it. I mean, we did see a couple of years back where he signed like Jalen Smith and Whitney Merciless and those type of
Mm.
in season acquisitions. So he's been trying, but I think what's been limiting him was the money. And now that a bunch of big contracts are off the books at the moment, he might be able to get more into, go back to that type of thing. I want to say it philosophy, which is weird because nowadays, well, we don't know about this year because they finally did address the tight end position this year in the draft. But before, even though LaFleur came from an offense that was a tight end heavy offense, for some reason they didn't value the tight end position. Was that a Rodgers thing? Was that a front office thing? Was that, whatever that was? Safety, they've always been trying. I mean, how many times do you got to take safeties in the first round before, you say they're not trying? Ha ha, Darnell Savage. What about the
Randall,
guys that they took? What's that? Oh,
Randall. I mean,
yeah,
that
but
wasn't a
they,
first round.
well, yeah, Damaris Randall was a first rounder. They converted him to corner instead of keeping him at safety. So I mean, how many times do you take a guy that high before you finally give up and try to, make a move for like a Buda Baker or something like that? I like I said, I'm having a hard time answering your questions because they're so broad
Sure,
of
that's intentional.
things.
That's intentional.
Yeah, I know you're an asshole. That's beside the point. So I mean, I think a lot of it is front office philosophies. Some of it was coach philosophy. You know, the Packers drafted what, three running backs one year: Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, and Devontae Mays. And even though they were great running backs, McCarthy still hardly used them, no matter what. Now with LaFleur, it seemed kind of the same way because how many times during the season did we say, Aaron Jones needs more carries? Aaron Jones needs more carries. Well, that goes back to my other thought. Is it more of a Rodgers thing, or is it a front office, or is it a coach thing? So I sometimes with the way things play out, it makes me kind of believe that the NFL is scripted because you can't tell me that a team's playing at an elite level and then all of a sudden they're shooting themselves in the foot just randomly. So it just, I don't know. Like I said, it it's weird. That's what's making your questions hard to answer. It's a weird thing to try thinking of.
Sure, no, no.
So give me another hard question, jackass.
Well, this one's a bit of an easier one. What players do you miss the most from these teams? Yeah, give me three.
Morgan Burnett,
Yeah.
maybe BJ Raji, and
Ah, come on, surely.
Jordy.
Not
Well,
even
there's so
Woodson.
many of. Yeah,
Not
but
Woodson over Raji.
yeah, but think about what we need right now. We don't need the corners. We need a safety.
Yeah, but like,
So are you going to put Woodson at
Woodson can
safety,
play
or are you going to
safety.
leave him at his corner?
Woodson can play safety. Be
Well, if
sick.
you want to play him as safety, then yeah, Woodson. But Raji, because it would allow
Sorry,
him.
not as in players that you want to put on this team. This players that you miss in general. You miss having around.
Oh, Burnett. He was a good guy. He really was. He was really nice. I really kind of struggle with it because maybe James Jones, because he seemed to really bring a spark to the offense with his leadership. He wasn't the greatest wide receiver in the world, but he was capable, and he saved the year that Jordy went down with the ACL. And I mean, I would say Woodson. There's a lot of them. Woodson, Al Harris,
Mm.
Burnett, uh, uh, Aaron Campman, Desmond Bishop. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there that you know. I wish we had players like them on the team. Uh, but if you want to know who I would say I miss that would help out now if they were in their prime, Raji, Burnett, or Woodson, depending on if you want to say safety, and
Jordy.
probably Jordy. I would have said Greg Jennings if he wouldn't have turned into an asshole after he left. But yeah, probably Jordy.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And for me, it's like there's some of these like character guys. Like that's why I think I would love to have Woodson just like around. You know, he was like such a leader and like a vocal leader. You know what I mean? He's the kind of guy who could actually like corral people and like motivate them, inspire them, which I just feel like we
Mike
don't really have much.
Daniels. I
Sure.
think he would be the type of guy that I would want on the team right now with the type of players that we have. Him
Yeah,
and
that'd be sick.
Jair, him and Devondre, him and
Kenny
uh, well,
back
we had
again,
him and Kenny for a while,
but not when
but
Kenny was like he's now.
I'm talking like personality wise. Maybe have
Sure.
him with Quay, because he would at least be able to show Quay that you can have intensity without going too far. Because Mike Daniels was that type of guy that he was an intense guy, but he never took it to the level where he was getting ejected from games. So yeah, I mean, and then like I said, James Jones was the same way. He had a way about him where he could be a type of leader and be vocal about that stuff. I think that's the one thing these teams miss are the vocal leaders. I know he's a taboo name right now, but Brett Favre was a vocal leader. He didn't say, play like I play, but I'm not going to tell you how to do things. He would be the rah type of guy on the sidelines during the game. So, that's what this team needs more than anything is somebody who's going to step in and be that leader both on and off the field.
No, for sure. No, exactly. And again, that's why I think like I miss Charles Woodson so much. Like yeah, I think like I'd say like yeah, Woodson, Geordie is definitely there for me. Just again, like as like a bit of more of a silent leader, but like the detail he put into playing the receiver position is something that I think is just so incredible. And then yeah, honestly, like Clay, Clay would be so much fun as well.
Yeah, he would be another one that I would say is probably a vocal leader both on and off the field. So yeah, he would definitely. I would love to have him on there right now just to be the type of guy to mentor Lucas Van Ness.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So many good players. I just think like, yeah, that's kind of what we're. Not, I don't want to say missing necessarily, but just waiting on, right? Like that kind of leadership, people to step up, and we'll see it this season. But we're just kind of waiting on that to pop up.
I think Jair started coming out a little bit of his shell last year. And I know a lot of people are getting pissed off about some of the shit he was doing, but it showed that he was trying to spark the team.
Mm,
Quay, like I said, if he could channel his intensity to not go overboard, I think he's going to be some type
I,
of guy like that.
I love Quay.
I Rashawn, I think Rashawn is going to be a quiet guy, but he's still going to have that intensity to him. Preston is going to be a leader. Bakhtiari sound. I know people are really roughing up Bakhtiari because of the whole rebuild talk that he's been saying, but with him being one of the elder men of the team, I think he's going to step up and be a type of leader for him. Yeah, it is, and I'm kind of hoping, cross fingers, that now that is out of the way, that LaFleur will go back to that fiery type of coach he was when he was first hired.
Well, yeah, it
Because that's
sounds like
another
there's more
thing
of
they
that.
need.
Yeah, it sounds like there's more of that, right?
Right.
Oh, and like, yeah, I guess, and is there any are there any coaches that you miss? James Campen, for one. Maybe
Mike
like,
Smith,
yeah,
but Kevin Green, rest his soul.
sure. Do you miss like I don't know Bennett? Like,
Not as the offensive coordinator because I don't think this might be controversial too, but I don't think he was that great of an offensive coordinator. But I don't know if it was because he was the coordinator, because obviously he wasn't doing the play calls.
sure.
There was a secondary coach before. I think when he was here when Woodson and all them were there. I'd have to look. I don't remember what his name is, but
And
then
like
again, I
even
don't know what Greg Williams is gonna do. So
sure, and like how about like even McCarthy, right? I mean, like, do you miss McCarthy at all?
no, because I really think his play calling got stale after a while,
Sure.
and I don't know if that's because of. Again, I don't know if that's because of Rodgers. I don't know if that's because he just if he couldn't adjust. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, I feel like based on what he's doing in Dallas, that's probably pretty safe to say it was a lot of McCarthy. The fact that he's not calling the plays anymore, and that he's like handed
Yeah.
over a lot of the offensive design over to Kellen Moore.
Sorry, I was looking up to see
Oh, good. And like, how about like
Joe Witt
Dom
Jr. Joe Witt
Joe? Oh
Jr.
yeah, no, yeah, yeah, yeah. How about like a Dom Capers?
If we could get the 2010 Dom Capers, maybe. Because with Dom Capers, it always seemed like that he would get hired, he'd have like 2 or 3 good years, and then he would regress completely. So if you could hire Dom Capers and get the 2 or 3 good years out of him, and then boot him for somebody else, then maybe. But no, I don't. Because I put him in the kind of the same boat as Joe Barry right now and as McCarthy. They didn't know how to make to adjust. They just followed script, and it showed that it couldn't succeed.
Sure. And to be honest, I kind of liked Mike Pettin. Like, I'm more than I like Joe Barry. Like, I don't know, and like, obviously, because like also Mike Pettin at least had some record of success. I'm like still waiting on Joe Barry. Guy's in his 60s now. Like, still waiting for a good defense from Joe Barry. At least Mike Pettin had a hand. Those 2010, 11 Jets teams, things like that. A lot of what Pettin does in the league is still like well respected.
But was it Pettin or was it Rex Ryan? Because Rex Ryan was a defense specialist,
I
and
mean, no,
he
he
was
was
the
he,
head
he was
coach during those times.
he was still a big part of it though. He was still like a big part of like that philosophy. Like obviously, I'm not saying that he should get all the credit for it, but at least he was like he actually had like a hand. Like Joe Barry being the linebackers coach for Brandon Staley does not count really as it's like having a big hand.
Yeah, but you could say that about Lafleur. he only had 1 year as an offensive coordinator. The rest of the time he was just a special,
I
positional
mean,
coaches.
yeah, but also Lafleur is not in his 60s and still waiting, and also Lafleur hasn't led a 0-16 team. It's very different, and
Yeah,
Lafleur's
but
actually good.
you also have
Lafleur's
guys
actually
like
good.
Pete Carroll that when they first came into the league, they did absolutely jack shit, and now they were viewed at one time as one of the best coaches in the league. So I mean,
Yeah,
it happens. I was never sold on Barry, but I'm not going to shit on him until you know. I it's hard to shit on him because the whole team has been a mess the last couple of years, and he's had some success with some, you know, the 49ers game in the playoffs a couple of years ago. Again, the only points that were scored was off a block punt and a field goal. Then look at some of the other games they had. The Rams game, the shit. My mind is so blank right now because I'm so friggin' tired. So I'm running out of. But they've had on and off games with him, but they've never been able to like put together the complete success. Just
sure.
have one solid year of nothing but a top five defense. I'm even asking for a top 10 defense.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no, yeah, that's fair. And like, I'm not gonna say he's like a terrible coordinator straight up, but I'm just saying we're just still waiting, and it seems like less and less likely as time goes on.
I've said the last couple weeks if there was any way we could demote him down to linebackers coach
Sure.
and bring in some other guy to be the defensive coordinator, I think we'd have a top notch defense.
I'm still sad we missed out on the guy who was in Denver last year, Ejiro Evero. I'm still sad we missed out on him because I wanted him to be hired when he was getting interviewed.
Who was it?
Ejiro Evero, who was the Broncos
Oh,
defensive
okay. Yeah, yeah, he was with the Rams too, wasn't he?
yeah, he was their defensive assistant
Okay.
there.
I was thinking, no, it was Fangio, wasn't it? But no, you're right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Well, I guess the last thing I want to ask you about, looking into 2023 here, how does the current roster kind of compare? What things should they be aiming to replicate? And who do you think are some guys on this team that we're going to be talking about in 10 years from now as guys that we really love to watch or had success here?
I can't really answer that because, like I keep telling people, this is I'm really excited for this year because it's a complete unknown. We've got so many guys on the roster that have never taken a snap, a snap in the league, or who have limited time in the league. Who knows what's going to happen? You know, Jordan Love could either be the second coming or a dud. Christian Watson could build on, and Romeo Dobbs and Samari Torre could build on from last year or go into a slump. The tight ends, are they going to do anything? Because, like a lot of people said, it usually takes 2 or 3 years for a tight end to get up to full speed in the league. Uh, so I really can't answer that. I mean, there's guys that I am looking forward to see what they can do. Like I said, I'd love to see how Christian Watson and Dobbs and Torre step up. I'd love to see what Jordan Love can do. Aaron Jones is going to be an Aaron Jones. Is he going to stay the same or is he going to regress a little bit because, he's getting a little tread on him? Or, I mean, the tread's going bare on him with age. Is AJ Dillon going to take that next step or is he going to be a dud? Uh, the secondary, Jair Razul, how's Eric Stokes going to do when he comes back? Um, Quay, the defensive line guys, Slayton, Wyatt, all that. It's a complete unknown. I really don't know what to.
Yeah, but like what I'm asking is that if you had to pick one person who you think, just for the sake of
No,
it,
I
just
was
pick
trying to
one.
answer your other question about how they compare to other teams
Ah, sure,
and what
sure,
you're.
sure.
But one that I'll say Jordan Love just because I don't know, he's going to be de facto leader being that he's the quarterback, and these teams are going to pretty much live and die off the quarterback play. And no matter how well your defense plays, if your offense can't score points, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, fingers crossed, this Jordan Love.
I hope the best for him. I like I've always said, I've never really been. I understood the pick. I was never a fan of it, but I was never gonna be the negative Nancy and completely shit on it.
Sure.
I've said for a long time, once they wear the green and gold, they're part of the family. And a lot of families, you got the ones that you like, the ones that you don't like, and the ones you wish that would just go away, but you're still a family.
Yeah, no, sure. Yeah, I think for me, the thing that I just want to see from this roster, I mentioned it before on this show, but I just want to see them, like you said, get some offensive success, build some rapport with each other, and kind of get back to like that being our identity. I just want to see something, some semblance of identity on this team. And with Aaron Jones, it's probably going to be his last season in all likelihood. Not never say never, but in all likelihood, kind of looking at like the young guys, like who's going to be running this team, who is the guy we're going to be looking for, whose jersey are we going to be buying. These are the kind of things that I'm just interested to see, because this is a team that has been defined by its offensive capability for the past 30 years now.
I'm going to disagree with you on Jones. I think he'll have 2 years, depending on how well he does this year.
Isn't this the last year on his contract?
Yeah, but they could always sign him, extend him for a year or whatever. But I have a feeling there's because unless AJ Dillon, and forgive me, he's a great guy. He's really done a lot with the community and everything. But unless he steps up in a major way, I don't see him back.
No, sure, yeah.
Well, if you do that, then the only one that you'll have on roster with contract is the guy that they took in the 7th round this year.
And Tyler Goodson.
Yeah, but he was a practice squad player. He'd have to sign a futures contract.
Fair.
It's not a
Sure.
guaranteed contract for him.
Sure. Yeah, but I don't know. I'm someone who's just like, I'm really not too fussed about turnover at running back. Like, it'd be nice to have him around, but I'm just thinking in likelihood, like I would bet on him not being here than him being here in a
But
year
the
from now.
thing is we've said it for the longest time. The Packers seem to always do things a year in advance. So if they were going to look to replace the running back position, I think they would have took more than just a 7th round guy. I think they would have picked up somebody in the mid round, 4th or 5th round, and then picked up a guy in the 7th round. But they only picked the 1 7th rounder. So either A, they're really high on Tyler Goodson, which, I've heard good things so far in OTAs. But as we've said before, this is just basically the underwear Olympics, and, anybody can look good in shorts and, no pads. Or B, they think AJ Dillon's really going to step up this year. Or C, Jones will be back for another season.
Sure, that's fair.
Unless Lou Nichols really tears things up and, goes Adrian Peterson on the team. And I don't mean like beating his kids. I mean like
I was
actually.
I was gonna make the joke, but you beat me to it. And it's fair for me, as far as future superstars on the roster. I mean, look, Christian Watson is probably the most likely one, but you know, I'm trying to think in terms of offense. You know, I think one of the offensive players that we have, like one of the tight, whether it's between the tight ends or the receivers, I think one of them is going to make an All Pro at least once in their career. I just feel like the amount of raw talent that's on this team at the moment, even just like from a physical standpoint, there's just too much, and the offensive environment is just too good. The floor's too good of a coach for them to not be good players, unless something goes wrong with like we get stuck in quarterback hell for a few years and they're literally just not able to produce. I think someone from this offensive room is going to step up and be really good. And Christian Watson is my guy, but if I have to like take off the Christian Watson colored glasses for a second, I would say maybe like Luke Musgrave. Again, this is one of these like we've seen what LaFleur can do with someone who is just like somewhat physically capable at tight end. Tunyon was all right. His hands were good, obviously, but he was never truly an elite game changing player. He just kind of like he was just smart, you know. He knew where to be. He knew where to be. He knew where the soft spots and the zones were. And you know, once the team adjusts and Luke obviously adjusts to the league, I think his athleticism and his talent, and you know, people always knocking him for the blocking, and Murphy compared him to Brian Gesicki, which I think is a little bit harsh. He does have room to grow in the blocking department. I think, yeah, you know, he's one of those guys who has the potential at the very least, and I would, you know, bet on being good.
I yeah, I'm really excited to see what. Again, you know, this team is a complete unknown right now, so I'm really excited to see what they're gonna do. You know, I'm even there to see what DeGuara can do because it seemed like him and Love had a solid repertoire when they got the chance together. So you know, maybe we all know how Rodgers felt about young players, which really pisses me off about why, with the way you see the videos and the photos coming out of the Jets camps, where he's, you know, living it up with the young players. Well, what the hell is wrong with our young players? We got you almost everything you wanted except for quote unquote the first round receiver, and you treated him like dog shit. But now you're going to go over there and make everything look good? Yeah, fuck you. I did kind of to digress from that. I did see that video that the NFLPA put out today. I don't know. Did you see that, Nick?
With
Where,
Clifford.
yeah,
Yeah, that was funny.
yeah, you know, how's my locker? You know, that's good. Well, why wasn't he doing that when he was here? You know, when he was here, we would get the snide remarks. We'd every so often we'd see him goofing off or having fun, but you know, I understand being upset at quote unquote your bosses, but like any other good workplace, you never take that out on your coworkers. And it seemed like, you know, we'd always hear about, oh, well, Rogers isn't going to throw to him because he doesn't trust him. Well, how do you trust him when you won't build that trust with him?
No, exactly.
So that's why it makes me happy seeing what Jordan Love's been doing. You know, building that chemistry with his guys. And I hope he learns that if he starts having success, why he's having success. Because he's building the chemistry with these guys. He's not just saying, this is my team, you're going to do it the way I want it. You better remember my hand signals from 50 years ago.
Yeah. No, sure. Absolutely. Well, is there anything else you want to talk about here before we finish up?
I just really want to apologize to everybody because I am really tired, so I don't even know half the shit I was saying tonight. So I probably rambled and on and on and on.
Nah, it's all good.
But other than that, you know, I think I'm good. Because really, as everybody knows, this is the off season, and it's so hard to do stuff in the off season because we don't know really what to talk about. So we're just kind of coming up, you know, on the fly with things. So if you guys have topics or anything you want us to talk about, you know, be sure to message us or, you know, tweet at us or, you know, flick your Twitter or whatever you got to do to send us a message and let us know what you want us to talk about. Or if you
No,
got guest recommendations.
no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, guys, as always, you can find us on Twitter. Myself at NicholasGRGR, Joe at Iowa_Joe86, the podcast at Outback_Packers. And until next time, we'll see you later.